So, hello everyone. We are here again today. So, I hope we're not cold for some weird reasons. There's a matan this morning, at least in our side. So, we're continuing what we started in our last class. So, by the way, we have Bolu and Toby on stream this morning. You guys can see I.
Hello.
Hello, good morning.
So, yeah, let's start. So, I'm going to go straight, sharing my screen right now. So, basically, in the last class, we did introduction to CSS, right? We talked about what CSS does in our web pages. We talked about CSS selectors and basically how CSS works, basically. So it basically selects individual HTML elements, then styles them. That's what CSS does. Then we talked about the different ways to which those HTML elements are selected. That's the element selector, the class selector, and the ID selector. Then we talked about two other secondary selectors. That's descendant selector and the selective. Cannot remember the name of that one. Let me check. Shadow descendant selector and one other one. Mm, 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 mm. Multiple selectors, yeah. So element selector, ID, and class selector, then descendant and multiple selector. Those are the 5 selectors we treated in our last class. Then we now learned about other CSS properties and values. That's the text properties, the color properties, then what else? That's basically all. Is there anything I'm forgetting, guys? I think I forgot to mention that we talked about yesterday. I mean,
CSS
Wednesday.
units.
CSS what?
Units.
Okay, yeah, units. That's basically how we size or measure sizes. Yeah. So we talked about pixels and percentage and also rem and em. So that's basically what we talked about. So now today we are going to Flexbox and layouts. So we're going to Flexbox and layouts. So we're just going to be building on the knowledge of CSS that we had in our last class. So first off, introduction to Flexbox. Flexbox, that's Flexbox Layout, is a CSS layout system that makes it easy to align and distribute items in a container, even when their sizes are unknown or dynamic. It is one of the most powerful tools for building modern layouts. So basically what Flexbox does, basically helps you to arrange different containers in your web page. So that's like the main mark Flexbox does. You understand? Then we now have, why do we use Flexbox? So we use Flexbox because in the past, before Flexbox was like created, creating layouts required floats, positioning, and complex arcs. So this positioning is like a long method to which they do arrangement in websites. So Flexbox just lets us break that barrier of going extra mile because we want to do or want to get a particular arrangement. Do you understand? So Flexbox makes it easy to come up with simple and common layouts like navigation bars, card grids, centering contents, and evenly spaced elements. So that's basically what Flexbox gives us. That's like the advantages to which we come. which we get when we use Flexbox. So let's go into the gist now. So the flex container and the flex item. So the first thing we have to learn about Flexbox is this. When we apply the display flex to an element, that element becomes a flex container. Then its direct children becomes flex items. That means whenever you want to add flex to a particular element, it has to be a container of what you want to display in a certain arrangement. Do you understand? So when we are using flex like that, when we are using flex, it's going to be in a container. Then the elements under that particular container, that means the child elements, are the one that that particular flex arrangement is going to be applied to. So we have an example here. So this is the example here. You can see we have a div container now. Then we name the div a class container. Then we have three items inside it. So when we want these particular items in here to be displayed in a certain arrangement, what we are going to do is this. We are going to apply flex to this container element so that your CSS is going to know that, okay, what this guy wants is that he wants to display these particular three boxes in a certain arrangement, either in a row or in a column format. So that's basically what happens when we use Flexbox, or basically how we use Flexbox or the flex property. So how do we use it? Normal way of calling it. Since we have already given that container a class container, we just call it using the class selector in our CSS. Then we use the display property, then give it a value of flex. So that's basically what happens. So the items arrange themselves in a row by default. That means by default, when we use that flex property, the arrangement of the container or the flex items are in a row format. That means in this place now, this example that we have here, if we were to view this particular element in our web browser, what is going to happen is that this item 1, 2, 3 will be horizontally stacked. That means they are going to be appearing beside each other. Normally, the default arrangement without flex is that they'll be on a column. But when you apply flex to the container, the flex items becomes horizontally stacked. That means they come beside each other on your web browser. That's like the default way to which they are arranged when we use flex. But since, or let's just say, because it's default does not mean it cannot be arranged in a certain way or in another way. You understand? So we need to understand axis before we can now tweak arrangements anyhow we want it. The first one we have is the main axis. So the main axis is the primary direction item flows. So the primary direction item flows when we use the flex direction or flex property is horizontal. That means the normal way, the default ways to which your items react when you apply the flex property is that they come out in the flex direction, since that's the in a horizontal direction, since that's the default. But when you change it to a cross axis, that means cross axis is the perpendicular to the main axis. So a cross axis is the vertical direction by default. So we can use flex box to arrange them either in the main axis or in the cross axis, depending on what exactly you want to arrange or the UI you are trying to replicate using code. So this is an example of what we are saying. So when we are saying flex direction row, this is the default. So by default though, this is how your this thing comes out. Main axis is horizontal, then cross axis is vertical. But when we change your flex direction to column, your main axis no longer becomes the row it was before. It is now on a column, it's now like in a column arrangement. That means something that was supposed to be horizontally stacked before now becomes vertically stacked. That means something that's supposed to be beside each other, now they are on top of each other. That's when you change the flex direction to column. But remember that by default, your flex direction is always in row. But if you singularly change it by yourself to column, that means the default behavior is going to change from being stacked horizontally to being stacked vertically. Then when you now change the cross axis is now going to be the horizontal arrangement. I hope you understand the difference between main axis and cross axis and how flex direction affects our arrangement of flex items. Do we understand? At least.
Yeah.
Okay. Then now let's go into the container properties and apply to flex container. So display flex turns an element into a flex container. So let's see an example of how all of this come to play. So let me open my code now and open our project. Let's try as much as possible to also code along Xbox and the let me link my CSS to this. Before we continue, let me say this. I feel like we need to know about this. File paths, right, is basically something that you need to understand. So now, if I want to link this particular CSS file, given the fact that we are in a folder, that's HTML is a folder, this index.html is in this folder now, and I want to link this particular file to another file that is in another folder. So if I was to do that, I'll be able to use this dot slash. So if there was another file, maybe there's another file inside the same folder. If I was to access it, I will use dot slash. Then the file will be like, it's going to come out as one of the files that are here. Let me show you an example. So let me create a new file. Let me just say example dot html. Let me change it to CSS just for example purposes. Then I'm in this particular folder. Remember, two of them are in the same folder now. If I want to access example.css, what I'm going to do is just press dot slash. And you can see example is one of the files that come out for as recommendation, right? But since the file that I want to connect to is not in the same directory, that means it's not in the same folder. What I have to do is press dot dot then slash. So it's going to bring out all the folders present in the project. That was going to bring out. Then I can now select that, okay, I want to go into the CSS folder. Then after that, it brings out the folder, the file inside that CSS folder. Then I can now select it. So that's basically how file paths work. I hope that's understandable. So let's continue what we have to do. So we have already connected to our CSS file. Then I want to go and start the example. So I told us that Flex basically works like this. So let's say I want to create a container that has three contents, that's three boxes in it or three items in it. So this is what I was going to do. First off, we need to know that the class of that container is going to be container. So I'm just going to give it a class container, then dot flex items times 3. So I have this in here. So we have three items within this. Now I want to type in items 1, 2, 3. So we have the three of them here. So this is what I'm supposed to do. If I'm to check this, we have not applied the flex to it yet. So this is how it's going to come out. It's going to come out in what's it called? In a column direction. Since we have not applied flex to it yet, this is how it's going to come out normally. That's by default, comes out like this. But when I apply flex to it now, so I'm going to come to our CSS, then now access the container. So dot container like this. Then I'll now call display, then flex. So since I said display flex, if I'm to check what I have now, they no longer stack vertically. Now they are beside each other. So I tell 1, 2, 3 are beside each other. So that's basically how flex works. So we need to understand that like this, the default direction of flex direction is row. So without you like specifying that you want it to be column, it's still row. So if I was to say flex direction now and I change it to column, it's not going to be vertical, horizontally stacked again. It's not going to be stacked vertically because you have already changed the main axis to column. So you can see now they are back in how you left them or how they were before because you changed the flex direction to column. But let's just leave that. I just wanted us to understand how flex direction works. Now let's continue. I already explained how flex direction works. We have flex direction controls the direction of the main axis. Row, that's left to right. Row reverse. So we have another one, flex direction. You know, we already understood what flex direction, row and column does. That means if you are row, it's going to be arranged from left to right. If it's column, it's going to be arranged from top to bottom. We have other flex direction. Now we have row reverse. That means you want the first item to come in last and the last item to come in first. That's what that one does. But they are still stacked horizontally. So if I say row reverse like this, they're stacked horizontally, but the first one will be the last and last one will be the first. You can see 3, 2, 1. That's how it comes out. Then we have column reverse as well. So 3, 2, 1. So that's the different values for flex direction that we have. So you can always come in handy when you want to get a particular arrangement. So we have already tested all of this. So let's just continue. So now we have something called the justified content. Justified content. I feel like this text that we're using is not like explanatory enough. Let's start the flex system a little more. Let's start it a little more. So before we continue, I forgot to mention this before. Our HTML files, they have some basic styles that come with it by default. That's padding and margin and I think box sizing. Yes, box sizing. You might not understand box sizing now, but you understand later. But let's know margin and padding. So let's just put those ones there. Then I will explain what margin and padding does for us later. So let's just start it padding 0, margin 0, then box sizing, border box like this. So on default, there's always some spaces that comes between the actual content of the page and the edge of the browser. That's what we are trying to nullify here by giving it padding 0, margin 0, and this box sizing border box. So this asterisk that is here now, what it does is that it's called universal styling. That means it applies to that particular page that you are connecting that CSS to. That's a universal styling. That means you're not selecting a particular tag, you're selecting the whole page. That's why you put asterisk there. So before we added this, let me give a background color to the container. But first, let's add the width. So width, we give it 100%. That means we want to take the full width of the screen. So 100% means full width of the screen. Then we can now give a background color of, let's just give it blue. So let's comment this out for a minute. Then see how this one is applied. You can see without that padding 0, margin 0, and border box sizing, there's a space between this blue background and this particular this thing here. So to avoid this spacing, we have to add this back. So if you check it now, that space is no longer there, it has disappeared. So this now gives us a fresh page to start working with. So now let's style our flex items a little more so that we like have a more vibrant example. So say dot container. Or let me test us a little bit. Toby, I'll ask us a question. I want to ask you a question in particular. If we were to have, access this flex item with the design descendant selector, how are we going to write out the code in CSS? We want to access flex item with descendant selector.
Rephrase,
Why do you say
rephrase, rephrase,
first?
rephrase.
We
Let me
want to
understand.
access flex item. This particular flex item now, you know that they are basically one of the items in this container. So we want to
Mm-hmm.
style them, these flex items. Now, let me
Mm-hmm.
select them in CSS using the descendant selector.
Uh, oh, wait. Go back to the what you want to style. Go back to what you want to style.
Please, it.
Mm. And then you use like you select the like the the div stuff. Yeah. Then you style it. Since that's where you wrote
Hmm?
those flex items inside.
I don't understand it first. Let me just give you a hint. You're not going to be calling divs since there are multiple divs here. We have one div,
Oh,
two, three, four. So if it's to call div now, it's going to be accessing all the div inside that page. I know that's going to give us an error. So what we are trying
oh,
to call gong is this flex item here. And we
hmm.
already thought about class selectors before. So that's the item. Just remember that we want to use descendant selector to get flex item.
Use the class.
Mhm. What's the class of the container?
Sauna.
Guy,
Oh,
it's
well.
not that deep. The question is not that you're just confused for nothing. Look, when I explained sender selector that time, I said, let's say we have this child selector inside here, right? That means we want to select the child one. So we have to call the parent first before we now call the child. That's what descendants mean. So we are going to say
Mm.
dot container first using the class selector. Then after this dot container, we'll now call dot flex item. Then we'll now put this. Do you understand? So even if there are multiple containers inside that page, it's going to really look for the container which has flex item within it, then style it. Do you understand now? I should come again.
Come again.
Okay. This is it. We want to access this one right here, right? But these
Mm-hmm.
three of them, they are inside this one. You understand up to
Okay.
that part, right?
Yeah.
That makes this one that is inside here a descendant of this one.
Mm. Okay.
Mhm. So now when I say we want to use descendant selector to access this one, that means in your CSS, we are going to call this one, then call this one before we now put our curly braces after it.
Hmm. I get
And
now.
we cannot use div to access them since all of them have div in common. That means there are four divs here,
Yeah.
and we cannot use div to access them since element selectors basically accesses all the divs in that page. So we are going to use class selector instead. So we now use dot container first, then put dot flex item after. So when we are styling it, it's going to look for container first, flex, then flex item, then passing those styles to flex items.
Hmm, I
So
get
that
now.
was basically the yeah. So we are going to be giving flex item a background color, or let's say a width now. So basically looking at our output here, how wide do you think each box should be? We have already given the first parent box, that's this big one, 100%. So how many percent do you think one should have to maintain like a nice arrangement?
But let's say 10%.
10% is too small now. We want it to like fill the space. Let's just say 30%. 30% of
Oh,
100% is like, um, so say 30% here. Then we give it a background color. Let's just say, then I want to edit this blue so that it's going to be visible. Then we can make our height constant. Let's just say 200 px. Sorry, I'm calling the wrong item. Sharp. So we have three box, one, two, three. Then we have the extra space. When we have 30 plus 30 plus 30, it remains in 10% space. That's why this
yeah.
blue side is still here. That's why this blue side is still here. So we already explained that one like that. So let's continue so that we'll see more items. Then now we'll now build on that. So we now have another property called the justify content. So justify content, what it does is basically controls how items are distributed along the main axis. By now, we already know what main axis is. So what justified content does is that, okay, since we have the main axis, how do you want to arrange them across the main axis? So we have the first one, flex start. So flex start is like the default arrangement for items within a flex container. So flex start is the fact that they are on the starting edge of the screen. That's on the left hand side. That's why all of them are arranged like this. Then the extra space is now on the left. Do you understand? So they call me like left to right. So where there's space will now be on the far end. So we now have the flex end. It's going to make the space be on the right. Then all the items will be on the left. So start means left, end means right. Do you understand now? So if I was to come here now and say justify content, flex start. That's the default one. So you are not going to see any changes. It's still going to be here. But if I change it to flex end now, you now see that, wait, let me check something. I don't know why it is not. Okay, mistake. It's supposed to be inside this flex place here. That's where it's supposed to be. Instead of in the flex item. It's supposed to be inside the container. This is the container that has the children. So the container is the one that will control how they are stacked. So we put them flex end now. So you can see the spaces now at the beginning. Then all the items are stacked to the right hand side. So that's how flex arrangement works. So we have other ones. We have the center, we have space between, space around, and space evenly. So let's test all of those. So justify content center. So the space that is there, the extra space is going to be shared in the left and the right since they are in the center of the screen. I hope you are following, Toby. So we have that. Then we also have the space around and the space between. So space around, it basically just share the space around all the elements. That's basically that was what I want to do. So you put left, right, left, right, left, right. So that's what space around us. But space between is not going to share the spaces in between all the elements. So you now have the space here, here, then the three boxes like this. Then we now have another one, space evenly. So it shares the space evenly around the elements. So those are the properties that come, I mean the values that come with justified content. So let's move forward. How Toby is there? Toby, are you here?
Joining on YouTube.
Okay, okay. So you have another one, align items. So it controls how items are aligned along the cross axis. So we have already learned that what's it called now? Um, flex items controls how they are aligned or arranged on the main axis. So align items does like basically the opposite of that. Controls how they are aligned along the cross axis. So the values that come with align items are flex start, flex end, center, stretch, and baseline. So that's what it does. So let's say we are already giving our container. You know, we did not give our container any height here before. So this align items might not work. So we have to change it. So let's just give height. Let's just say 100 VH. So 100 VH is basically the size of most of the screen. That's like the height of most standard screens that we have there. So that particular height is going to be filling up our screen. So you can see that it's no longer halfway, now filling up the screen that we have. So that's why we put 100 VH. So now we want to see how this align items works. So controls how items are aligned along the process. So the first one is flex start. Then we put align to the start, that's to the top row left in the column. So what it does is that's the like default behavior of align items. So let's just change that one. They will now come align items. Then we'll say flex end. Flex start is going to be at the flex end is going to be basically at the bottom. So you can see it moves to the bottom. That's what flex end does. We have center. So you basically put it at the center of your screen like this. Then we have, let me check another one. So we have stretch. So stretch to fill the container. We have baseline, align based on text baseline. So, but the main ones are this center, flex end. Yeah, flex start is default sharp. So the default behavior of it is that it's always at the top. So anyone you want to use. So flex start, I mean align time center stays at the center. We have baseline. So it works based on the content inside that particular text that's within it. Then we have stretched. Let's just keep center. And let's continue. Then we have another one now, flex wrap. So flex wrap controls whether items wrap to new lines when they don't fit. So that means, we already gave a width of 100%, right? And we want our flex items to have a width of 30% each. So in a case whereby we have more than 3 items inside our container, that means that 30% is no longer going to add up again. So it's going to be like overflowing in the sense that the space that is available cannot contain what you are commanding it to do. So in this case, we have 1, 2, 3. All of them are 30%, 30%, 30%. Now you now put another one. So that makes it 120% of your script. And you know you don't have that much space within it. So the stuff does not add up anymore. So you have to like change that. And to do that, we have this wrap. So no wrap, that's all items stay on one line. That's the default. And it might overflow sometimes. Then when you put wrap, the items wrap to a new line. That means if the space that is available cannot contain the items, then the overflowing item will go to a new line. That means it's going to show under. So you just come here and put flex wrap in this container. Flex wrap and you put wrap. Then you have something like this. That means it cannot contain 1, 2, 3, 4. So the fourth one will now come down. So that's basically why this one is down like this. So that's what flex wrap does. So if you put wrap reverse, the item it wraps in reverse order. So it will be like 4, 3, 2, 1. That's how it's going to be. Then the one will now be in the bottom. So 4, 3, 2, 1. I mean 1, 2, 3 will be down, then 4 will be up. That's what flex wrap reverse does. So that's how flex wrap is. This is super important for card layout. So we should note that. Then we now have another one, align content. So content controls spacing between lines when items wrap. Only works with flex wrap. So value same as justify content, flex start, center, space between. So what this one does is this, it basically controls the space between the rows of that particular content in the container. So it works the same thing, but it actually works with flex wrap. That means if you have already put flex wrap before, that means let's say I remove this justify content that we have here. Oh, let me check something. Okay. I remove this justify content that we have here. And let me just leave the align items. So you know we have already removed justify content, space between. There's no longer going to be space between these elements again. So we're not going to put align content space. So it basically works with flex wrap. I don't know why it's not working now.
I think it worked. It just added more space to the top row and the bottom row.
Okay.
Just remove it and see.
So yeah.
Comment it out and see it.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. There was space here before. So yeah, he added more space to it. Oh, and let's continue. That worked. So we have align content. Now we now have another one, gap. By the name gap, you already know that it's space that you're talking about. So it adds space between flex items in more modern and clean way. No need of margin. So we have not spoken about margin and padding, but we'll come to that. So gap is this. Let's say we did not put any space. between this. Let me remove this wrapped as well so that it follows the normal order. So we have them like this. Let me add the wrap back. Oh, just wrap. Wrap reverse. Then I put gap. That means I want gap to be between the elements that are in this container. So I put gap like this. Then I'll now say, let's say 20 or 10 px. So I want to give spaces between the elements that are there. So we have 10 px, 10 px. 10 px is also here, but it's only bit to this side because there's no space that can contain this item 4. So that's all that. You can also increase the gap as well. 20. And then it increases. So that's what gap does. So you can also tweak gap in a certain way that it affects. Normally, gap affects all 4 sides. That means 20%. 20 px space between all items. So that means items that are left and right from each other and items that are on top of each other. So we have this side like this. This side and this side have 20 here. This side and this side have 20 here. Then this one and this one, they are going to have 20 between this place. So that's how gap works. So in a case whereby you want the space between the vertical items, that means items that are beside each other should be smaller or bigger than the space that are on top of each other. That means you want this one and this one, the space that are between this one and this one, to be smaller or bigger than the space that are between this one and this one. So you can also do that. And to do that, you basically just write 2 values. The first value is going to be for the vertical space, and the second one will be for the horizontal space. So it's going to be like this. So we have 20 px. Let's say we want to keep 20 px for the up and down. So the vertical will not be, the horizontal will not be 40. So the space that is here, you can see now is more bigger than the one that is here. So that's how gap works when you are using 2 values. So now we have the item properties. So all of those things that we have talked before now, you can see that we're always putting them inside this container, flex container property. So they belong to the flex container. So now I want to talk about flex properties that actually affect the item. So the first one is the flex grow. It controls how much an item should grow relative to others. So first one, a number, default is 0, don't grow. That means if you want, let's say you do not specify a size for all of these items here, you put 200, then put this. Let's just keep the height, but let's remove the width. So when you put flex grow 1, first off, you can see how it looks like now. When you have removed the width of the thing, they are now on the same line. So now let's put flex grow 1. So this item will grow to fill available space. That's what flex grow 1 does. So all the available space inside that particular property is going to fill it up for each of the elements. So it's going to share the space evenly within all the items that are there to fill up the available space. So remember that we already put 40 px beside each other. That's why this gap is affecting it like this. Then we put flex grow 2. The items grows twice as much as others. Okay. Mistake. So this first one affects all the items. That's item. Now we said flex grow 1. We put 1 there. Then put this. But in the case whereby there's another item within that particular container that you want to be as much bigger than the rest, you can always do something like this. So you come down. Let's just flex special, as you call it in. Then you come here. Then you maybe add another class to this. By the way, you can have multiple classes in HTML tag. You just have to put space. You just put flex shy like this. Flex. So that one is going to be twice as big as the other items that are there. I feel like why it's not working is because the available space has been, filled up. That's why it is like that.
Put the two. You put flex item as two, and you also put flex special as two. Check it.
Okay. So 1, 2, 3. Then we have the fourth one, bigger than this. I feel like I'm seeing double now. Thanks, bully. So we have 1, 2, 3. Then we have this fourth one. Yeah. So that's how flex grow works. Then example, I already showed us example, so we don't need to have waste time on that. And we have another one, flex shrink. So it controls how much an item should grow relative to others. No, I've already talked. Controls how much an item should shrink when space is limited. So when there's limited space, you want to control how the item should shrink. So value a number, default is 1, can shrink. So let's say we have item that's flex shrink 0. These items won't shrink. So if you put flex item flex, that's flex shrink, to this item shrink such as faster. So let's try it. So put flex shrink inside this one. 0. That means when we reduce that particular space, when there's limited space, this particular flex shrink will not shrink at all. But in this other one, we put flex shrink 2. This one is going to shrink faster than the rest. So to test this out, we're going to do something like this. Yes. I don't know if you notice what's happening there. As we increase it, this one is reducing, but the rest of them still like keep a constant size regardless. So when we reduce this now, this one reduces twice as much as this one does. So that's how the flex shrink works. That's how it affects like them. Then we have flex basis. So set the initial size of an item before growing or shrinking. Value API, blah, 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 blah. So starts as 200px. So from the definition, you already know what flex basis does. It basically like sets the initial size of an item before growing or shrinking. That means before the thing grow or shrink to a certain stage, that is the initial size it has to be. So that's most of all these properties, if you might not later use them when you're actually building like your this thing, just like have to like use the one that you're comfortable with, and the one that gives you results basically, and still follows standard. You understand? So that's basically it. So we now have the flex shorten, combines flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis together. The syntax is this: you just write flex, then you put the 3 values together. So the first value is the grow value, second one is the shrink, and the third one is the basis. So it always comes out something like this. You have item, you now put flex, then 0, 0, 200 pixels. That means you want it to grow 200, you want it to shrink, you want it to grow 0, you want it to shrink 0, and you want the basis to be 200 pixels. That's basically what this explains. And this one, 1, 1, 300, grow, shrink, basis. So let's continue. I don't think we need to go over that. So we now have another property now, align self. It's still under flex items. That's the item properties. So it overrides aligned items for specific items. So we have dot container that's display align item center. Then we now have this one special item align self, then flex end. This item aligns to bottom. So if you want to try this, you just come here and say align self flex end. So this fourth one now beats to the bottom and leaves the other three elements to be on top. Remember that you have to have this one align items center here and this one displaying flex before it can work. So it basically just overwrites the align item center that's here, then becomes a man of himself and come down by himself. That's what this align self does. Ma? Yes. So we have this align self here. So common layout pattern, we have this navigation bar. So this is like one of the things that a lot of people use, like from day to days when they are building websites. So let's just do this navigation bar example. So that time I was teaching us that we explained what's it called now, semantic tags. We talked about how our navbar should be and where exactly it should be in our page. So it should be in the header tag. So just put our header here, then a nav in between them. So let's come and check. So now inside here, inside our nav, we have two basic things. That's our logo div, this one, then our list items. So we have the three of them here. So we have div here. So we are using div in this case because we don't have an image for our logo. You can always use a text as well. If you want to put text, we just put like a span, this thing there. Let's say my logo. Then you now list out your links. So airline. You might be wondering, most of the time when I type, there's a way I like copy stuff down and type on multiple lines. I think. So those are shortcuts I use to like make my work easier. So do that, like for example now, this one where I typed li once, then I multiplied it 3 times or 4 times. What you press is just your shift and your alt button. Then you press your down button as many times as you want to duplicate that particular line of code. So just press shift and alt, then 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Or you can always highlight what you want to duplicate like this, then press the same button. It does the same thing. So now if I want to like type on multiple lines, instead of shift, I'll press Control Alt and I'll press down, down, down like this. And I'll press the A since I want it to show here. But if I want to type on multiple lines but in different locations, that's another thing again. So let's say I want to type here and here, just the top and bottom. I'll press only my Alt button, then click where I want to type. So I'll click here. I'll click here. Since it's the first person, I'll click on the second person. Then I'll type here. Let's say home. Yeah. So that's basically it. So we have home, about, services, and contact. About, services. Then we can always write hashtag between all these ones, so that the links basically just refreshes the page when you click them and when you click them. So inside our UL, it has a class item, nav menu. So we can always have that as well. Then our nav is going to have is a nav bar. So we have our nav inside our header. So this is just the basic nav bar. So if you have to check this now, it might not look as good as you want it to look. Then we'll now have our style. You can see that it's just like this. So we can now style it to match what we want. So you can see the stylings. First things first, they displayed everything flex. That means they don't want it to follow the same, a column direction. They want it to be on the flex direction. So they put display flex. Then justify content, space between. That means we want space to be between all the elements that we have there. Then align items center, so that everything will be vertically stacked in the center. Then we now have padding, 1 rem and 2 rem, then background color. Hashtag 333. I think that's white or black. I think FFF is white. So 333 should be black. So I've not mentioned padding and margin to you guys. Let me mention it now. So padding is basically the space between an element and the content of itself. That means since we have this now bar now, and we are already giving it these spaces, this styling. Let me remove all of this. So we have this. So let's use this universal one as an example now. I told us that before we add any element, there's always a CSS style that's commonly used. On default, that is there. So it's basically the space that's between the page edge, that's the edge of this page, in this particular far end, and the content that is here. That's basically what is there. So padding is basically the space between the content and the edge of a container. And margin, on the other hand, is the space between the edges of two elements. That's the margin. So let's say you have an element, the border of the element and the border of another element. So we have two elements. So the space between two of them is the margin. So padding is now the space between the edge of the element and its content. So put that in mind. So now we have in this navbar now. Let's style it. So let's add the padding 0, margin 0, box size border box. So this box sizing here, what it does is this. Normally, we give a particular box. Let's say we give it 100 px, right? And let's say we have like 2 boxes in that particular page. 2 of them are 100 px. So normally 2 of them are beside each other. Maybe you added padding or you added margin to space them out. So when you add the margin to it, let's say you have the margin of 20 px to 2 of them, and the normal size of the boxes are 100 px. Now they are no longer 100 px now. They are not taking space more than the 100 px that you put there initially. So to avoid that extra space, you have to add this box size in border box so that the 20 px padding or margin that you're adding to that particular element is subtracted from the initial width of the box. Do you understand? So let's say we have a box. Let me look for it. So these are boxes now. So this is what I mean by margin. The space between this blue box and the content, this place, that's the padding. The margin is now the space between 2 of them like this. So border box, this is what it helps us to. We have these 3 boxes on the same line. We have already told the code that you want them to be 100, 100, 100 pixels. Then you now put 20 pixels here, 20 pixels here, 20 pixels here. Space is 20 pixels basically. So instead of adding to the original 100 pixel that you have before, now makes it 100 and 120 pixels. And maybe that's the extra space that you have. Maybe you have a total space of 300 pixels. When you have 100 all through, that's 300. So you now want to add spaces between 3 of them. Instead of adding the 20, then makes it 120. That destroys the calculation. So it's no longer the 100 pixels that you wanted it to be. So you now added box sizing so that when you add those 20 pixel space, it is not 120, it is 80. That means it minuses the extra space that you want to put between them from the actual width of the element. So that's basically what box size in border box does. It comes in handy very much. So let's just put that in mind. So let's continue styling our navbar. So we'll say dot navbar display flex. Then here's this justify content space between align items center. Then okay, padding. So padding, I already told us that padding is like a space between the side of the edge of the box and the content. So in this case now we are talking about the size of this place that is here and the content that is in this place. That's what we have. So now put padding one range. So this is basically the vertical, just like the one we explained in gap. So vertical is top and bottom space, then horizontal is left and right space. That first one vertical, second one horizontal space. So if I was to do this on my own, I will not use rem sha. I already said I don't use rem, but since we are already following like a script here, so I'll just go with what we have. So one rem and two rem. Then we have a background color of hashtag 333. So that's basically hexadecimal. So that's gray. Yes. Yeah, it's not all black. So yeah, this one. Then we'll now enter our nav menu again. You can see that we have this here. These are above. Then we have all of this. So they are still in this format because they are in another container. This particular UL is like the direct container of this one. So this one and this one are beside each other. That means the logo and this one are beside each other. Normal. But this particular li are still vertical because they are inside another element entirely. So we have to like tell this one to display flex before they are beside each other. So we'll now come down and now call dot nav menu. So we put display flex as well in this one. So say display flex. Then we put a gap. Then list items. I mean list style. No, you can see that we have lists there, airlines are there. So the default behavior of lists is that it has like a bullet beside it. So we have to remove that bullet because like they beautify our work. The piece is almost dead. So it does not make our work like look nice. So we have our items like this 1, 2, 3, 4, then this 5. I feel like this now is going to be the last thing. Then we can continue from there in the next stream. So because my piece is almost dead now. The power just went off. Then we also style our anchor tag. So basically we're styling the link that is there. We want the color to be white, the text decoration to be none. Text decoration is basically the underline that we have there. So we have this navbar here. Then we can always style our navbar to also have a white color. That's the span that is there. So dot navbar span color Right. Text. Font size. 20 px. Font width. So we have this here. So this is basically the first part of like layouts basically. So if you have done this up to this point, that means you have taken your first step in designing like a very nice web page for yourself. So this is basically where we are going to be ending today's stream. We're basically will be ending today's stream. Before we end, do you have anything to say, guys? You guys. Anyways, this is the end of today's stream. Hello guys, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, my PC basically died. That's why I went off stream. I just joined on my phone. So that's basically the end of today's stream. So those are one of the challenges of staying in Nigeria. Basically, the light supply, the electric supply is worst. So yeah, we basically concluded with learning CSS and we designed our first snapper. So we'll just continue there for our next class. So if we have any questions, you can basically ask in the comment section, then we'll do well to answer you. So we always answer. So, or do you guys have anything to say?
No, but the only thing I have to say is just we are sorry for the breaking transmission. It was probably
Yeah,
unavoidable. So,
yeah, it was unaware because the thing just went off.
mhm.
It was actually a mistake on my part, sef. I knew. I knew that this was going to happen eventually, but it skipped my mind. I plugged in my laptop, but I did not on the socket. So I thought my laptop was charging, whereas it was not. So yeah, we meet again on Monday. So summary videos are going to be dropping. I think I'm going to be dropping other short videos as well for us to watch. So let's try as much as possible to engage it. Thanks for today. We will meet again in the next stream. That's going to be on Monday. So yeah, bye guys. Meet again soon.
Bye bye, guys. Have a wonderful day ahead.
Yeah.